Welcome back to another episode of the Wealth of Health Show. My name is Brian, and joining us very shortly will be Dr. Lynn. And today we're going to be talking about diabetes and weight and how all of that correlates to your overall health and possibly how you can stay a little healthier on a more regular basis, or at the very least, a little more sick-free, we'll say. All right, so without further ado, I do have our old national anthem that we were using prior to switching platforms. I'm going to go ahead and play now for you as the opening, since we don't quite have the opening for this show set up just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now as we get Dr. Lynn on the line. Thanks for tuning in. All right, there's our opening. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Dr. Lynn. Hello, Dr. Lynn.
Hey, how are you, Brian? Good to hear
Good.
from you.
Yes. Did the national anthem come through okay?
It puts me on hold while you're playing.
Okay.
So, I hopefully it did, but we'll find out when we do the replay. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise there's going to be about a minute or so of silence.
There you go. There you go. Hey, Brian, let me just say this as a start to this show. And again, just keep in mind, folks, we've been trying to keep this show, to keep your attention, somewhere around a half an hour. So bear with us and stick with us to the end, because today we're going to be talking about blood sugar regulation, diabetes, and why. If you really want to know the why behind this, is the fact that out of the 88% of people who passed away from COVID during the whole pandemic from early 2020 through now, diabetics are topping the list. Why? Why would a diabetic have a suppressed immune system? That's been the question medicine's trying to figure out. And we do know, and we've talked about it in the past, that extra fat cells that we put into our body interfere with the immune system. So could it be that rarely, now again, please take this with a grain of salt, rarely do you see a thin diabetic unless it's a type 1. Today we're talking about type 2 diabetes. This is diabetes that has come into your system as a result of lifestyle, genetics, lack of exercise, whatever you want to fill in the blanks. So we do know that diabetics died proportionately higher during COVID. We do know that diabetes or prediabetes, according to, if you want to put any faith into some of the government agencies, that diabetes or prediabetes is now affecting 67% of the American population. I looked that up right before we went on the air, Brian, and it was like, are you kidding me? Like 2/3 of our population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And if you extrapolate that out, this is 2021, by 2025, it'll be almost 80% of our population. The drain on the healthcare system to take care of diabetics is it's unconscionable. You can't even put a number on it because of the various parts of the body that start to really wear out during diabetes. So that's a little bit about why we decided to do this. And I will tell you this, when Brian and I were talking yesterday and a couple of days earlier about doing this show, and Brian brought up a really good point because Brian's our walking and hiking guru, and he takes people out for hikes in and around the Atlanta mountains and really gets you outdoors. And he and I were talking about diabetes, and we're talking about, yeah, we know that if you eat too much fast food, you're going to end up there. Yeah, we know that. And we know that if you eat too much sweets, you're going to end up there. Yeah, we know that. But Brian made a really good point, is that in his opinion, and I got to back him up on this, what may be a higher risk factor for diabetes is a lack of exercise. Mm-hmm. That may be even a bigger factor. So, Brian, just your thoughts there. If we believe that, and I do believe it, that those that sit on their duff and watch TV all day or sit at a desk are going to be more likely to become a diabetic. So your thoughts on that?
Well, diabetes, of course, as you know, that's just one of the myriad of other problems that arise from that. I can tell you from personal experience that if I sit longer than about a week without going to the gym or going hiking or something, I can actually feel atrophy setting into my joints first, really, where all the flexor muscles are and things, and then it starts seeping into my triceps and other muscles, and it's not comfortable. And it doesn't take long either. So, likewise, whenever I find myself, or if I find others, friends, family, and things like that are, kind of in a slump, or they decide that they don't want to go exercise with me, or just don't want to exercise at all, if they have their own regimen, and they go about a week or so, it does not take long to fall into a slump. It does not take long for anything once you start breaking routine, whether it's side effects from atrophy or other things going on in the body to just not wanting to do it anymore, losing the motivation, whatever it is. That's partly what I'm there for, is to kind of help with the motivation, because I'm right there with them. I'm human, so I find days I'm just not really in the mood. But then the part of me that's been doing this for the last 30 plus years says, all right, you know what's going to happen if you do this. If you go into this slump, or if you slack off, you're going to feel like crap in a few days. And then above that, in about a month, or whenever it starts setting in, you're going to feel like absolute crap. The bloating is going to come back. Things aren't going to be digesting like they should. It's just going to be a cascade failure at that point, like a domino effect. So as far as diabetes go, to answer your question there, it is all over the place. I'm not even sure that a medical doctor, I could be wrong, but I'm not even sure that a medical doctor could predict the cascade of negative effects that happen over a person's body when they either fall into a slump, get out of an exercise routine, never really had one to start, depending on eating habits. If they eat out a lot, they eat a lot of fried foods. If they eat a lot of fatty, lipid type foods in general anyway, red meat's a big one. So fast foods, I think we had a show on that once about the snack foods people eat. What was the number one? Chips, I think, right?
Chips is number one, exactly.
Yeah, chips and candy bars, so really starchy, really sugary type foods. And if you get home from work, you're tired, you just want to snack on something and watch TV, that's got to be the absolute worst of the worst, I think, in my own 2 cents. And then, as you mentioned, the issue I have a lot of times is that if I do try to encourage someone to get out, then it kind of goes back to that, I don't really feel like it today. All right, so to clarify here, guys, yes, I do like to exercise. I just got off a backpacking weekend. Actually, I just led a group out this last weekend for about a good 30, 40-mile hike, and most of you are going, oh, gosh. Well, I've been doing this a long time, so, that's not that big a deal. But, you don't have to start there. That's the end result of having done it for a lot of years. The starting point is me either suggesting, going with you, you finding the schedule or the motivation to do it yourself, just do 5 or 10 minutes. Take your dog out for a walk. Go out to the park yourself on a nice day. If you've got a gym membership, go hit the treadmill for about 5 or 10 minutes. I know it sounds awful to some that have been kind of in a slump for a while or just don't really, have the motivation or the interest really to pursue it. I'm going to go back to Lynn here in just a minute so he can go over statistics with you guys. But just doing 5 or 10 minutes a day to give you kind of a rough idea before Lynn starts really going into the deep statistics is on just, we're not even talking speed walking, just basic walking. In my mom's case, in my grandmother's case when she was with us, in pretty much every single one of my friends' parents' cases, all elders, all people my age, etc., 5 to 10 minutes a day will net you about a 50% cut in your triglyceride levels in less than a month's time. I want to say my mom started seeing differences in about 2 to 3 weeks. So that's just 10 minutes a day. She was just walking, going up to the park. Now she's doing about 2 miles a day. And to give you guys a little statistic on that, her triglycerides, I want to say, were over 300 prior to this exercise regimen. And her total cholesterol was like maybe 230, 240, somewhere in that range. Now, and it's been a few months now, of course, but from a month after she started doing this to the current day, her triglycerides are now 140, 150-ish, somewhere in that range. And her total cholesterol levels are pretty close to about that same amount. She has a little harder time getting that down, but I want to say it's about 150 or 160, with the HDL being a little lower than where the doctors want it. But nonetheless, huge improvement. And we're just simply talking walking a very moderate or slow pace for 10, 15 minutes a day. All right. And with that, I'll go back to you, Lynn, so you can fill us with statistics.
Yeah, and I think just for those of you who just heard that, and Brian mentioned about lowering triglycerides. And for most part, maybe you go to your doctor once a year and they do some blood work and that number comes up. And your doctor says, well, we got to get that number lower. But never fully explains to you what a triglyceride is. What's a triglyceride? Triglyceride is short for tri-3-glycerol alcohols. Now, let's just think for a minute. Any of us, when we were in college, that attempted to brew beer on our own or make wine on our own, what did we do? We put something that was either a sugar or a carbohydrate into a liquid, we added sugar to it, and we let it sit back and ferment. Mm-hmm. And what did it do? It turned into an alcohol. Okay, so beer is an alcohol, wine is an alcohol, vodka is an alcohol, all made by a fermentation process. So, as God created our bodies, we have to understand one very important thing, okay? We need gauges on our body. You know, we see that new device now that they have for diabetics where they slap this thing on their waist and their skin, and it measures your blood sugar. So they're not pricking their fingers so often to check their levels. They can just look it up on their cell phone. That's great. That really does help. It gives you a level of the glucose in your bloodstream. What's glucose? Glucose is a complex sugar. Where does it come from? From carbohydrates. A small extent from protein, a small extent from fiber, but mostly from your carbohydrate intake. So, as we look at our bodies as God created it, we have to consume properly. We have to consume in moderation. We have to digest it. It needs to be assimilated and then taken up into our bloodstream. Why? So that our red blood cells could transport that fuel. That's our fuel. That's our gasoline for our engine. And it moves it into our muscles to be burned, basically, for lack of better terms, inside of what's called the mitochondria in every muscle cell to produce energy. Why? To keep us alive. Yeah.
Something I'll mention too, real quick, that just dawned on me as you were explaining that some don't know is that, especially those on the low carb diet, carbs are a vital role in glucose, as you mentioned, which fuels something else too that's quite important. You know where I'm going with this? Brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for cognitive function and things. I thought I'd go ahead and bring that up since we were talking glucose. So,
Amen. Amen to that. And I'm going to share something on that same line with you, because our brain is the largest consumer of energy in our body. Second is our heart. Okay, to keep us alive. Brain functionality, heart functionality. So again, glucose is necessary for life. Now, as we eat it, we consume it, it gets digested, and it's thrown out in our bloodstream. Now, we have to be able to get it out of the bloodstream into those muscles. It needs to have open a door to get into those. How do we do that? As God created our bodies, again, we have this gland in our lower right quadrant, like over, if you put your hand down by your lower right rib, your last rib, and take your hand and extend it out to your belt line, right in there is your pancreas. Why? What's it do? Well, the pancreas does produce digestive enzymes to help us digest our food, but it also, a small area there, the islets, actually produce insulin. So the brain is tracking the levels of glucose inside of your bloodstream, and it's going to produce enough of the units of insulin to go out into the bloodstream to open up those doors to get the glucose into the muscles so the muscles can burn it, produce energy, and everything is cool. So there's this constant stream of us eating 3 times a day or more, of fuel going in, insulin being produced, going into the muscles to produce energy. Well, where's the problem then, Len? As Brian said, if we are not exercising, we have this measurement in our blood called triglycerides. If that glucose stays in the bloodstream too long and circulates around a second time and a third time, it can form an alcohol base called a triglyceride. Why? Because, again, God knew how to try to keep us alive, even in that case, by that formation of triglycerides, which get dumped into visceral fat as little storehouses of energy for later on. But if we don't have a later on, what's the later on? If we're not going out walking and exercising, it's going to stay in that visceral fat, and another layer of fat, and another layer of fat. And pretty soon, we start gaining weight. And as we gain more and more weight, more and more levels of triglycerides, our bloodstream starts to show it, and then comes the catastrophe where the pancreas can no longer produce enough insulin to take care of that blood sugar that's circulating. And I always have said to a number of people, when I first started studying naturopathy, and we were studying diabetes, and I sat down one-on-one with one of my instructors, and he was playing a little game with me. And he had, like, you ever see those guys that put 3 cups up in front of you, and they put a little prize underneath those, and they shift them around, and you got to guess which cup has the prize underneath it? Well, he did this, and he said underneath one cup is cancer. Under the other cup is diabetes. And he said, I'm going to give you your choice. If you had to make a choice and say, which one do I want? Well, you don't want either one of them. But if I had to, which one could be controlled better? Truth be told, it was and is, from a naturopathic standpoint, believe it or not, much easier to control cancer than it is diabetes. Diabetes is the most dangerous disease state, in my opinion. It will cause more harm to the body in a quicker period of time. And once your pancreas quits producing enough insulin, the amount of medications that are necessary, the amount of injections that are necessary, and how your lifestyle changes, and how you start gaining weight the minute we start using insulin. And pretty soon, your normal life of eating foods you like has just ceased.
And on that note,
the heads up for today is, and the takeaway message number 1, get up and move. God built you to move. That has to be step one, number one, Brian, in trying to control diabetes.
If a person, another thing too, to add to that last statement you made, if a person does get to that point where they're being forced to make a lifestyle changes, diet changes, and get pumped with a bunch of things they don't want to, and testing and various other things, if you haven't started exercising or a routine at that point, you're pretty much going to be forced to. So one way or the other, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, I would say.
Well, let's go through the first steps.
Yeah.
Step number one is get up and move.
Yep.
Okay, let's just leave it at there. Whatever level you're doing now, double it. And try to do it more. Oh, I've got bad hips. Go to the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing, if you're going to control blood sugars, lose weight, and do everything that's necessary, we have to live by the rule of no excuses.
Right.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we have to understand fast food of any sorts. Fast food of any sorts.
Processed food.
I wish I could say that you go to Wendy's and you go to McDonald's and get something that's halfway decent. But even their dressings they use, even if you go there for a salad, we still run into complications. So understanding what a whole food is, what a balanced meal is.
That includes
and Brian,
processed foods as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly.
Sorry.
From a cooking standpoint, and I just need you to give a quick summary.
Sure.
Here's my question: is it difficult? Is it expensive to eat healthy?
Okay, so I hear this one a lot, and let me real quickly kind of summarize that up by saying it can be. All right, so it's like anything else, Is it buying a new car expensive? Well, it can be, depending on the type of car you want. We're talking apples and oranges, but the concept is the same. So do you want to go out and buy the absolute best of the best, organic or co-op, farmer type foods and do 100% clean type diets and things of that nature? Is it expensive? Yeah, it is, because you're paying for all that extra work that they have to go through to make it clean for you. So yes, it can be, but for the average person looking to try to clean up their diet or go healthier or start trying to move towards a detox type system or type of cooking, it's not that much more expensive. In fact, in my case, I found that it is a lot cheaper, and those who followed the type of diet that I follow find it cheaper as well for one reason that we've come across. There's multiple, but one main reason, let me say then. The biggest reason is that when you do processed foods, fast foods, things of that nature, you probably heard people talk before about the term, quote, empty carbs. The fast foods, the processed foods, and things of that nature are not far from that. In other words, when you go out and you eat your 1,000-calorie Happy Meal or whatever it is you get at McDonald's or wherever it is you go, those 1,000 calories in a healthy perspective would be a lot. In a fast food or processed food perspective, your body can't really pull much from it. So it pretty much goes straight through your system. You might feel full, or it might kind of give you the pseudo sensation that you're full, but it really doesn't do anything for your body. That said, when you eat the fast foods and processed foods, then you're not really, whatever calories you're getting in that, I would say probably, 5% or less is actually doing anything for you, and the rest is just going straight through. So you're going to actually have to eat more of that stuff to either give yourself a feeling of fullness or whatever it is that your body can pull from that, Whereas, say you did salads. Okay, I do a salad. I don't really do much for breakfast. I don't care for sweet stuff very much. So if I do a typical American type breakfast, it's usually something like eggs or something that's fibrous, like a oatmeal or some sort of grain type food. Beyond that, though, I typically will I'll do something like yogurt and salad for breakfast. That's actually I enjoy that a lot. Or fresh fruit. That's another good one too, for that matter. But so then I'll do maybe a salad for lunch. And then maybe I'll do something a little heartier, meats and proteins and things for dinner. And to add to that as well, I do usually a protein shake in the morning and then one usually for lunch. So I am getting protein through the day as well. So to kind of clarify that a bit, it doesn't sound like much. And for those of you out there listening, yes, I do have a. If you pumped my information into a fitness tracker type program, there's a good chance it would tell you I'm burning upwards of like 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, just ballparking it. But a lot of those trackers are, their algorithms are designed to calculate based on what most people eat here in the States, and it's a bit skewed in my opinion. So, I haven't lost weight. I'm still about 220 pounds. I'm very athletic, very, very cut. And I haven't really lost any weight. My fat proportions and muscle proportions and all that are actually on par with the diet I just mentioned. All right. So a lot of you out there, I'm sure, are saying, "Oh my gosh, how can you live on that?" You know what? I asked the same thing many years ago. I said, "There's no way I can live on just salads and very lean meats." Well, you know what? When you do that, instead of only using like 5% or less of what it is that I'm eating, my body's using about 100%, which does so many things. It gives me all of the nutrients and all the things I need for muscle building and repair, for immune health, for triglyceride health, for lipid health, all those different types of things that the body does in, every day. And then above all that, because it's a whole food fiber and because it's a whole food calorie, nutrient dense calorie, etc., I'm going to feel just as full, if not fuller, off of those things than you did off of your, I don't know what McDonald's has, with a double cheeseburger, whatever they have. And that's because I'm getting all of the nutrients and calories from my food as opposed to it passing straight through from the processed or the fast food. So that's kind of the takeaway I would give you on that. And to recap what Lynn was asking, yes, it can be expensive, but when you take into account that I am having to eat, I only need to eat about a fifth, maybe a third of what you're eating in processed or fast foods. Actually, even though it's healthier foods and those two tend to be more expensive, I'm having to actually spend less because I don't have to eat as much of them. That would be the takeaway I would get from that. So if you figure on, some oatmeal, a couple salads a day, protein shake, and then your average dinner, and you compare that to, say, 3 massive fast food meals or processed meals, it's quite a bit less than what you think. So yes, you can save on health foods. It is a change, and it is something that takes some time to adapt to, but it can be done, and I can actually prove that in my own lifestyle as well. So for those of you out there looking to make these types of changes, I'd be more than happy to help you out. I've been doing it for a lot of years, not just in myself, but also for others, as well as fitness programs. If you feel like that there's something you cannot do, as Lynn said, due to hips, arthritis, if you are already facing overweight problems, no matter what it is, I guarantee you there is something for you out there. I've worked with a lot of different people. There are fitness programs that can accommodate to pretty much any situation you are in, as there are cooking programs and health programs, healthy food type programs. Give us a call, 678-228-8900. Ask to speak with Lynn or myself, and we will help you work out anything that you might be having concerns with at this moment, or maybe something you've tried in the past and it hasn't worked. We can find a solution for you. All right, Lynn, back to you.
Amen. And Brian, I think what we're going to have to do is continue this discussion next week.
I think so.
Because literally, we haven't touched on 1/10 of what I just jotted down as some of the ideas that I wanted to cover. So
right.
At this point, let me just say this. I was watching TV last night, which I'll watch football games and I'll watch golf on TV and occasionally some series. But 3 times last night I saw the same commercial. And it's a graphic of a female with big blue eyes, really highlighting her eyes. And it basically says, are you diabetic? Are you watching your eyes? And it gets to be, their claim is that the average diabetic is not taking care of their eyes. And when we understand that that circulating blood sugar can glycate. What's that dessert, Brian? That is it creme brulee when you put that sugary, creamy thing, and then they take a blowtorch and torch the top of it. Is that creme brulee?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so they crisp the top, right?
Right.
And they add some heat to the sugar, and it makes that glaze on the top. You know? Well, guess what? That blood sugar at 98.6 degrees internal can do the same thing in the small capillaries of your eyes, your liver, your kidneys, your circulatory system, and or your brain. So when we're talking about blood sugar control, I'm putting it at the top of the list that if you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, and next week I think we'll go a little bit more on the labs and some of the lab values.
Right.
But at this point, I think the average person will know if you're overweight, you have parents that were diabetic, grandparents that were diabetic, and you're one of those risk factors. We got to make some changes now.
Right.
And we will spend the next couple shows, I think, going into this in depth. The one I want to talk about and I want to finish up with today, Brian, is called intermittent fasting.
Right.
You know, it's something that I've tried to do myself over the years. My mother's side of the family, going back to my grandparents and my great-grandparents, we had diabetes everywhere, the Italian side. And it's always been a risk factor. And obesity on my grandmother's side was another factor. So I was fighting most of that most of my life. And even into my 20s and 30s, I had fasting blood sugars that were creeping on the side of being abnormal. Now, intermittent fasting, for those, you know, that even adhere to the scriptural, biblical term of fasting, from a spiritual perspective, understanding that, you know, you read when Jesus walked the earth for those 3 years, the numbers of times he went off and fasted for 40 days, fasted for this. That's not what I'm talking. Intermittent fasting, from a simplistic standpoint, is 1 or 2 days a week of fasting for 24 hours. So going like Tuesday and Friday, I eat dinner Monday night. I eat breakfast. I skip breakfast the next day. I skip lunch the next day, and I eat dinner again. So it's been 24 hours from dinner to dinner, but I skip those 2 meals in between. Can you do that 2 days a week? Can you eat dinner the following morning, skip breakfast, skip lunch? Now do this, make sure that you're under a doctor's orders, you know, and then eat dinner. So you've actually fasted for 24 hours. That simplistic approach of taking all food out 2 days a week over a 24-hour period can reset the insulin clock and break insulin resistance and improve your blood sugar by anywhere by 20 to 30%.
I'll add to that actually too, in that the diet I was talking about before, what I do. The reason why I do what I do as well, just to kind of fill in the gaps for those of you who might have questions about my diet and the little bit I went over that, I intentionally eat about 20 to 30% less of what most programs and most doctors and most people or most recommendations given to me for what I need for my caloric intake each day. And I have found, by the way, I've been doing this over a year now. Actually, I've been doing this several years. But anyway, I have found that when I eat about 30% less than whatever these different things recommend, that not only do I maintain my weight, but I am able to keep lean weight on me far easier. And I keep my same exercise regimen and things of that nature. So going on with what Lynn is saying, or to complement it, to get started, if you want to start going this direction, an intermittent fast is phenomenal. And then once you have taught your system what it means to eat when you're hungry, as opposed to eating when you just feel the urge, you start learning, your body starts learning to eat until you are not hungry anymore, as opposed to eating when you're full. And then this is something we'll get into later as well, where it takes 20 minutes for your stomach to tell your brain, hey, I'm full. That's a lot of eating in that time span. So that said, don't keep eating till you're full. Stop the moment you are not hungry anymore, and you will feel a world of difference just in that little change as well.
Amen. So this is just the start of a discussion on blood sugar control, because we're putting it up there as the most prevalent disease state in the country right now.
Right.
And it's the number one link to cardiovascular disease, by the
Oh.
way, which is the number one killer in this country.
On that note, Lynn, you mentioned something on the eyes. I wanted to kind of run over that real quickly, too. I studied medical terminology when I was in school, and I know you did, too. So let's break down something called glaucoma, speaking of the eyes, and the reason why it's called that. And I'll let you elaborate on that because you can explain those things better than I can. But why is it called glaucoma?
Well, it's a combination of terms that
Yes.
was put together because when understanding that your eyeball is like a balloon, okay, and it has to maintain a certain fluid level inside, okay, to keep the pressure on the lens to the front and the retina to the back. And in between there's a lens. So in between what we see, it comes in with a lens, in through the liquid layer inside of the eyeball, and then hits the retina in the back where it's, again, an attachment to the brain. So, again, the eyes are an extension of the brain, and that liquid that's in there has to be maintained at a specific pressure. So it has to have a pressure release valve and another source of fluid coming in. Okay? So over the course of difficulties that we run into with circulation because blood sugar is too high, and we start getting that glycation that can take place in those real small capillaries, we end up not allowing that pressure to diminish in the eyes. So what we end up getting is the retina starts to deteriorate on the back wall. We start seeing floaters. The pressure starts going up. We put pressure on the lens, and our vision starts to deteriorate rapidly. So what's the immediate cause? Blood sugar is out of control. That's the typical first. Now, there are other predisposing factors as well, but blood sugars and glycation can be linked right away to increases in pressure inside that eyeball, which can lead eventually to blindness.
Right, and then when I was thinking about the medical terminology, that was actually a phenomenal explanation. But I was actually thinking about why Gluck has a definition, and then of course OMA has a definition. Why they came up with it. So OMA meaning tumor or mass, not always cancerous, of course. It just simply means mass. And then Gluck is Lynn. I left that off for you actually.
No, the blood sugar, of course.
Right, correct, right, yep. So it means a mass of blood sugar, for lack of better terms. But yeah, your explanation was extraordinarily good. But yeah, I just wanted to.
Let's wrap this.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this segment up. And again, the website thenutritionshop.net. Make sure you tune in. I do a daily show called Your Daily Dose, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday mornings at 9. And Brian, tell them where they can go to watch all of this.
Oh, on our website they can go. We're on all the major platforms now. The only one we're not on is iHeartRadio. Still waiting on that. Still waiting on Amazon. Other than that, we're on everything else. And if you can't find us on those other platforms, you can go to our website, and we have players. We actually have these podcasts embedded directly on our website, and so you can find all the different platforms that we broadcast on through our website directly if you have some issues. And you can listen to it live on the website, too, for that matter.
Amen. So tune in every day to get a dose of health talk, and our goal is to get this word out to the world. So if you hear something on a show like this, please share it with somebody else, and you can make a difference and potentially save their lives as well. So again, 678-228-8900 to reach us off air.
And you can reach us live, by the way. We don't have a call-in number at this particular time, but we are hooked up to Spreaker Chat, meaning if you have a question for us during a show, then you can add it to the chat box, and we'll answer it in the order that we get it in and try to get in everyone's questions through the show. But if something is left out, then we'll try to get back to you through a private message or something similar. But you can get with us live as we're talking through the Spreaker Chat if you want.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, till next week, we'll go back and do diabetes and blood sugar issues part 2.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Lynn, thanks for being with us, man. Thanks for all of your great insight and knowledge on this.
And we will talk to you real soon.
Yeah. All right. God bless everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you, or Hope to see you next week.